are now recording.
All right, so here's a demonstration of some of the contract attorney features that we've got in LegalServer. And a lot of these are pretty flexible and really configurable to the use case of any organization, right? So, and for this site, we built out a separate contract attorney create process. So, right, I'm gonna create a test contract attorney account. Right, and we've got this automatically set to default some of the fields here, right? And one of these, right, we've got it set to default the pro bono restricted access. This clearly is not a pro bono user, but it's still an outside user. So to give the same set of limits that we'd have for a pro bono volunteer on the civil side of things, we'd want to use the same user role here. We can then add in the details behind that test contract attorney. We can give them an email address. We can include their contact information, right? Their and what work or other organization they work with. I'm not going to fill that out here for the purpose of this demo. We can link them to an organization, right? An organization could be another legal service, or it could be a law firm, and we can record when they were working there or what they did there, or we could choose not to set that organization association at this time, right? We then have the opportunity to indicate some additional information about that contract attorney. We can indicate if they speak any specific languages, if they are members of the bar, and we can have them put in their bar number, right? And there's my bar number. We could have record how they were recruited. We can even include what types of cases they work with. Again, this list is defaulted to some of our civil areas, but these are lookups that anyone can edit in LegalServer. Any administrator in LegalServer can edit. And so your site could have something other than family law panel. It could have misdemeanors or felony cases or death row cases, or it could have traffic cases, right? It's however you want to organize those situations. The same with problem codes. Problem codes on the civil side are an aspect of our grant funding, but in terms of the criminal and public defender side, it can be however you want to structure your cases, right? It could be felony dockets versus misdemeanor dockets versus traffic court dockets, or it could be even more detailed than that. You have to pick out which counties that they're willing to work in, right? This is a list of all the counties in Texas, which is a lot. And you can pick as many as you want, or just one or two. And finally, we can include some additional notes, right? So this can be anything from please call before making the assignment. Right? Or it could be that they only take cases in the first week of the month. And finally, we've got the ability to set a password on an individual user. So all right, and so now I've got my new user, right? If under system information, I can see the username for this person. I can, under the extra information, I can see those details that we put in about this individual. And then the step from here is we assign them a case. So in LegalServer, every case gets assigned. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick this test case, which currently has a primary assignment of LegalServer staff. And we're going to assign this to a outside counsel contract attorney, right? And so I'm going to use the process that I built here called assign to contract attorney. And this gives me a list of the different contract attorneys in the system. And then below that, I've got the current people assigned to this case. So that I could see if we had already referred this case out. And while we have, we can make a second referral. That's not going to break the system at all. And here's that test contract attorney that we just created, right? And I can see what languages they can speak, what subjects or problem codes they're part of, I can see the last case they've received, or even how many open cases they've got, right? This way I can know, is this someone that I've given a lot of cases to lately, or who's next in the list? And these are things that I can sort, right? I can sort by the date of last assignment so that I'm rotating through my panel in a using a wheel, right? And I can also read that note that I said, please call before making this appointment. And frankly, I'm going to ignore that comment right now and just click assign, right? This then brings me to the ability to link in that contract attorney. You'll see that I can't change that user, right? That's fixed here, and I'm linking it based on the contract attorney office. I can add an assignment note, which means that I can add text that's going to get saved into the case notes of the file. It says, this is going to be a good fit for the attorney, right? And if I wanted to, I could even say, hey, do me a favor, send this to the contract attorney, right? And here it's showing up with my example of sending to test@example.com. It'll use the subject up here for the body, the subject of the email. It'll use the body here for the body of the email. And then it's going to append at the bottom this message down here that you've been assigned this new case. And here's the URL to look at that case. And this is text that can be modified on the back end of this form, right? If I went to edit this form, I could change what those details are that are being automatically added to this assignment email. And if I needed to, I could also include any attachments in that email, right? To say, hey, please also include this file, right? And that would be an attachment that's coming from my computer, right? The way that this is set up, this volunteer, this contract attorney will be able to see those documents when they log in themselves. So let's make this assignment. Right? And then if I come over here to people and organizations, right, we'll see at the top, test contract attorney is assigned to this case. And so they've got it, and they can be working on that case. So let me log out real quick. And then we'll log in as that test contract attorney. Test contract attorney. All right, and so I've got a very limited sense of what I can view initially when I log in, right? And I can see my current assignments, which includes this case, this test case that we just assigned to that attorney. So I'm going to click on the case, and this gives me a new contract attorney case profile. So this is a scaled down version of what the attorneys or the staff members can see, but this is a wholly customizable set that can be defined to exactly what you need for your organization, right? If you need them to see case notes, they can see the case notes on the case. If they need to see documents on the case, they can see the documents on the case, right? And they can see all of the emails that went with that, any attachments that were on that. They can see in this configuration, they can see the arrests on the case. They can see the charges on the case, right? And that's loading slowly. They can see sentences on the case. Right. All right. So charges, right? You can see that we've got the only result here is that there isn't really a charge on this case, but if we needed to, we can edit that. So we could set this up so that they could edit the charge if they needed to. We could also put in here sentences, right? And link those to the charges. So to say that on this date, there was this charge that happened, and they got sentenced in court to 3 days of confinement, right? That all can happen in here. We can also record discovery, right? If they're involved in any discovery events with the case, in terms of passing documentation back and forth, right? We can also set that up. And all of these things, discovery, charges, these aren't traditionally made available to our outside counsel or contract attorneys, right? So that's why we saw some of those signs about right? Not being able to view some of these documents. Those are individual settings that we can then change on the back end. We can say, all right, well, this is something that we need to make sure that our contract attorneys can see, and we'll open that up, right? Another example is that there's an internal messaging system in LegalServer, right? Again, this can get exposed, and we can have them able to send messages to our staff to say, hey, I got this case, I'm missing this document. Can you make that available to me? Right, and when they're done, they can just jump back into the case. Right, we can also say, we can also come up to this actions menu. And in the actions menu, we've got a number of different things that this contract attorney can do, right? The first might be, oh, I actually can't handle this case. I have to decline, right? I'm going on vacation this week. I told you to call me in advance. You didn't call me in advance, right? And we can, this will set a message back to the staff saying, hey, this case needs to get reassigned. Please remove me. Another option that that can get handled, right, is to say they can add a case note, right? I'm recording my notes. Here's how to do it, right? Here's what needs to go in here. And you can choose to include that case note as an email to a co-counsel, or use the internal messaging system to send that note. You can even include time, right? And one of the reasons that we might want to record time is that if we're recording time for contract attorneys, then this way we can say, hey, I'm recording this time so that, right, so please record all that time information for me to say that here's my 5 hours, and that can be used later on to say, there it is, right? And then we can include discovery requests, right? Here's an example of that discovery request form. And to fill out all the information about what we're looking at or why we're looking at it. We want to upload copies of the discovery so that they can see it. We've got the ability in here to send text messages to the client, right? You might not want the text messages coming from your personal phone. You might want them coming from the LegalServer account, right? And you can send the text messages to the client, and any message that's in here, you can even schedule it for later as a reminder for something else. And you can see any of the replies. The other tools that are here, right, beyond that, have to do with adding time and then adding voucher requests. So with a voucher request, right, the client that we built this out for said, we need to know their final hours at the end of the case, and we need them to submit a request saying, please send in all of those details, right? And so we set this up to show a report of all of the time on the case, and then to submit a voucher request, right? What's the note? Is there a note? What's the starting date and the ending date? How much is the voucher for? So hourly rate of $100, 10 hours, $500 for other expenses, right? We're looking at a $1,500 voucher. And then they can say, hey, I'm going to submit this as a pending voucher request, right? And that just got saved into the case. If we go to close the case, right, we all need our contract attorneys and volunteers and others to tell us what's happening with these cases, right? So we can see that we've got this outstanding voucher request. If we needed to, when we're closing the case, we could create a new voucher request as well. Right, we've got the ability to edit the charges if we need to say like, hey, here's our test charge, and the final disposition was guilty or not guilty or pled out. This client also asked about recording plea deals, right? We wanted to know that on July 1st, 2020, we were offered a plea deal that expired at the end of the week, and that the hired counsel made an offer, right? And we can say no to these. And the amount of the plea was, it was 5 months. And then conditions was take it or leave it. right? And so we can record all those details about what happened during the pendency of that case. Then we can continue. One of the other things that's available in the system is to record the custodial status, right? Is the person incarcerated? And we can say that they were incarcerated and serving their sentence, or that they were on their initial arrest, or that they're out on bail, right? And then we can record additional details about this in terms of when this started and how long they were there, so that we can make some calculations later on to say they've been in custody for 50 days or 100 days so far. And if you want to, you can even link this to specific case notes or specific institutions. And then lastly, we've got the ability to edit the sentences, right? So we can set select the charge, select the date or the judge or the court, indicate whether there's a fine of $500 maybe, and put that in there. Then lastly, we can say that this case is now ready to close, and that's because we provided limited action on this case. If we wanted, we could even include some good stories about handling it if we felt there were some, or we could say no and just I finished this case. Right? And that's how a contract attorney could go from start to end on that case file. If we log out and then log back in as a staff member, right, we'll be able to see that test case. And we can now see that it's in a status called ready to close, right? And that told us that, hey, we've already gotten somewhere on this and it's moving along. So one of the things that could happen first is that we could come to the voucher requests, and we can see these voucher requests. And here's that first one that we just created just now. And here's all the details on that voucher request. And I built this out with 2 levels. So the first level is to approve that voucher request, and someone could click this approval button. And if they wanted to, they could change to saying that this was approved, right? And they can make any feedback notes if they wanted to. Or they could say that this was pending more information requests, and they could put questions in here. At which point it would show back up for the contract attorney, and the contract attorney can make some other additional changes and then change the status again to more information provided, right? Putting the ball back in the court of the internal staff to review, right? And finally, it could also just flat out be rejected. But if we said that this is approved, right, it can then get continued. And then the last step is that under actions, right, there's now a record voucher payment feature, right? So instead of it being approved, we can now move it to paid, right? And we can indicate who paid, who is the person in charge of making the payment, and what date that payment happened. And these are all fields that the contract attorney can see, right? They can see in a report who paid it and when it was approved and when it switched from pending to paid or pending to approved. And so that they can get a sense of where they are in getting their funds, right? And so that's all something that can happen in terms of seeing the progress of this case. And the other step is that the staff members can actually have an internal report to track those voucher requests. And it is outstanding voucher requests is the report that I built out. And so that they can see all of the existing voucher requests and what the current decision is. And then at the right side here, we've got links to that approve or reject or that record payment pages so that they can go straight from here to the next steps that they need to make to either approve or deny these various outstanding requests, right? And one of the things that happened here is we moved this into a ready to close status. The point of that was so that the internal staff could then review the case before the outside counsel, before it finally got closed and it gets reported to the state or it gets reported to the funders. But then there is internally a criminal closed case form, which then walks through what we had before but this is just the internal side of it. So unlike before where we could edit these or we could add a new one, right? We could also just click here, voucher request, and take a look at the details behind this and see the notes here. We can then come back and click continue. We can look at the charges and make sure that the disposition and the arraignment and all the other details are finalized, right? We can look at the plea deals that happened or if any did. We can update the custodial status if that's necessary. And finally, we can edit any sentences, right? And we can have multiple sentences on a case, right? There might have been 3 or 4 charges here, and one of these charges was dropped, and one of these charges was sentenced to 3 months, and another was sentenced for 4 days, right? We can have as many sentences as we want on a case. And finally, on the last page of this closed case, we're now switching the status from ready to close to closed, right? And we can set the reason why, and we can indicate who finalized or approved the final closing of this case. And I can just click continue, and now this whole case has been closed, right? And this on the left here changed to a red because the case is done. And we've both been able to record the payment of the case, the payment of the voucher on the case, the work that was done on the case, and any other information that the contract attorney passed back and forth with us. And that's an example of how to use contract attorney features in LegalServer currently.